Frank Heyling Furness, November 12, 1839, June 27, 1912, was an American architect of the Victorian era. He designed more than 600 buildings, most in the Philadelphia area, and is remembered for his diverse, muscular, often unordinarily scaled buildings, and for his influence on the Chicago architect Louis Sullivan. Furness also received a Medal of Honor for bravery during the Civil War. Toward the end of his life, his bold style fell out of fashion, and many of his significant works were demolished in the 20th century. Among his most important surviving buildings are the University of Pennsylvania Library, now the Fisher Fine Arts Library, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, and the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, all in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Biography. Furness was born in Philadelphia on November 12, 1839. His father, William Henry Furness, was a prominent Unitarian minister and abolitionist, and his brother, Horace Howard Furness, became America's outstanding Shakespeare scholar. Frank, however, did not attend the university and apparently did not travel to Europe. He began his architectural training in the office of John Fraser, Philadelphia, in the 1850s. He attended the École des Beaux-Arts-inspired atelier of Richard Morris Hunt in New York from 1859 to 1861, and again in 1865, following his military service. Furness considered himself Hunt's apprentice and was influenced by Hunt's dynamic personality and accomplished, elegant buildings. He was also influenced by the architectural concepts of the French engineer Viollet-le-Duc and the British critic John Ruskin. Furness's first commission, Germantown Unitarian Church, 1866–67, demolished ca. 1928, was a solo effort, but in 1867, he formed a partnership with Fraser, his former teacher, and George Hewitt, who had worked in the office of John Notman. The trio lasted less than 5 years, and its major commissions were Rodef Shalom Synagogue, 1868–69, demolished, and the Lutheran Church of the Holy Communion, 1870–75, demolished. Following Fraser's move to Washington, D.C., to become supervising architect for the U.S. Treasury Department, the two younger men formed a partnership in 1871, and soon won the design competition for the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, 1871–76. Louis Sullivan worked briefly as a draftsman for Furness and Hewitt, June, November 1873, and his later use of organic decorative motifs can be traced, at least in part, to Furness. By the beginning of 1876, Furness had broken with Hewitt, and the firm carried only his name. Hewitt and his brother William formed their own firm, G.W.&W.D. Hewitt, and became Furness's biggest competitor. In 1881, Furness promoted his chief draftsman, Allen Evans, to partner, Furness and Evans, and, in 1886, did the same for 4 other longtime employees. The firm continued under the name Furness, Evans and Company as late as 1932, 2 decades after its founder's death. Furness was one of the most highly paid architects of his era, and a founder of the Philadelphia chapter of the American Institute of Architects. Over his 45-year career, he designed more than 600 buildings, including banks, office buildings, churches, and synagogues. Nearly 1/3 of his commissions came from railroad companies. As chief architect of the Reading Railroad, he designed about 130 stations and industrial buildings. For the Pennsylvania Railroad, he designed more than 20 structures, including the Great Broad Street Station, demolished 1953 at Broad and Market Streets in Philadelphia. His 40 stations for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad included the ingenious 24th Street Station, demolished 1963 beside the Chestnut Street Bridge. His residential buildings included numerous mansions in Philadelphia and its suburbs, especially the Main Line, as well as commissioned houses at the New Jersey seashore, Newport, Rhode Island, Bar Harbor, Maine, Washington, D.C., New York State, and Chicago, Illinois. Furness broke from dogmatic adherence to European trends, and juxtaposed styles and elements in a forceful manner. His strong architectural will is seen in the unorthodox way he combined materials: stone, iron, glass, terracotta, and brick, and his straightforward use of these materials, often in innovative or technologically advanced ways, reflected Philadelphia's industrial realist culture of the post-Civil War period. Furness married Fanny Fassett in 1866, and they had 4 children: Radcliffe, Theodore, James, and Annis Lee. He died on June 27, 1912, at Idlewild, his summer house outside Media, and is buried at Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. Military service. During the Civil War, Furness served as captain and commander of Company F, 6th Pennsylvania Volunteer Cavalry, Russia's Lancers. He received the Medal of Honor for his gallantry at the Battle of Trevilian Station. Medal of Honor citation: rank and organization: Captain, Company F, 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry. Place and date: at Trevilian Station, Virginia, June 12, 1864. Entered service at Philadelphia, PA. Birth. Date of issue: October 20, 1899. Citation: The President of the United States of America, in the name of Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to Captain, Cavalry Frank Furness, United States Army, for extraordinary heroism on the 12th of June 1864, while serving with Company F, 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry, in action at Trevilian Station, Virginia. Captain Furness voluntarily carried a box of ammunition across an open space swept by the enemy's fire to the relief of an outpost whose ammunition had become almost exhausted, but which was thus enabled to hold its important position. Gettysburg Monument. 25 years after fighting in the Battle of Gettysburg, he designed the monument to his regiment on South Cavalry Field. In design, it is a simple granite block, as massive as a dolmen, but surrounded by a corona of bronze lances that are models of the original lances. They are depicted in a resting position, as if waiting to be seized at any instant and brought into battle. The sense of suspended action before the moment of the battle is all the more potent because it is rendered in stone and metal, making it perpetual. Of the hundreds of monuments at Gettysburg, Furness's is among the most haunting. Rediscovery. Following decades of neglect, during which many of Furness's most important buildings were demolished, there was a revival of interest in his work in the mid-20th century. The critic Lewis Mumford, tracing the creative forces that had influenced Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright, wrote in The Brown Decades, 1931, Frank Furness was the designer of a bold, unabashed, ugly, and yet somehow healthily pregnant architecture. The architectural historian Henry Russell Hitchcock, in his comprehensive survey Architecture, 19th and 20th centuries, revised 1963, saw beauty in that ugliness. Of the highest quality is the intensely personal work of Frank Furness, 1839–1912, in Philadelphia. His building for the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Broad Street was erected in 1872–76 in preparation for the Centennial Exposition. The exterior has a largeness of scale and a vigor in the detailing that would be notable anywhere, and the galleries are toplit with exceptional efficiency. Still more original and impressive were his banks, even though they lay quite off the main line of development of commercial architecture in this period. The most extraordinary of these, and Furness's masterpiece, was the Provident Institution in Walnut 6 Chestnut Street, built as late as 1879. This was most unfortunately demolished in the Philadelphia Urban Renewal campaign several years ago, but the gigantic and forceful scale of the granite membering alone should have justified its respectful preservation. No small part of Furness's historical significance lies in the fact that the young Louis Sullivan picked this office, then known as Furness and Hewitt, to work in for a short period after he left Ware's School in Boston. As Sullivan's autobiography of an idea testifies, the vitality and originality of Furness meant more to him than what he was taught at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or later at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. Architect and critic Robert Venturi in Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture, 1966, wrote, not unadmiringly, of the National Bank of the Republic, later the Philadelphia Clearing House. The city-street facade can provide the type of juxtaposed contradiction that is essentially two-dimensional. Frank Furness Clearing House, now demolished like many of his best works in Philadelphia, contained an array of violent pressures within a rigid frame. The half-segmental arch, blocked by the submerged tower which, in turn, bisects the facade into a near duality, and the violent adjacencies of rectangles, squares, lunettes, and diagonals of contrasting sizes, compose the building seemingly held up by the buildings next door. It is an almost insane short story of a castle on a city street. On the occasion of its centennial in 1969, the Philadelphia chapter of the American Institute of Architects memorialized Furness as its great architect of the past. For designing original and bold buildings free of the prevalent Victorian academicism and imitation, buildings of such vigor that the flood of classical traditionalism could not overwhelm them, or him, or his clients, for shaping iron and concrete with a sensitive understanding of their particular characteristics that was unique for his time, for his significance as innovator architect along with his contemporaries John Root, Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright, for his masterworks, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, the Provident Trust Company, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Station, and the University of Pennsylvania Library, now renamed the Furness Building, for his outstanding abilities as draftsman, teacher and inventor, for being a founder of the Philadelphia chapter and of the John Stuart Son Memorial Scholarship in Architecture, and above all, for creating architecture of imagination, decisive self-reliance, courage, and often great beauty, and architecture which to our eyes and spirit still expresses the unusual personal character, spirit and courage for which he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for bravery on a Civil War battlefield. Legacy. Furness designed custom interiors and furniture in collaboration with Philadelphia cabinet maker Daniel Pabst. Examples are in the collections of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the University of Pennsylvania, the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, Georgia, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and elsewhere. Mark Lee Kirk's set designs for the 1942 Orson Welles film The Magnificent Amberson seem to be based on Furness's ornate neo-Greek interiors of the 1870s. A fictional desk designed by Furness is featured in the John Bellairs novel The Mansion in the Mist. Furness's independence and modernist Victorian Gothic style inspired 20th century architects Louis Kahn and Robert Venturi. Living in Philadelphia and teaching at the University of Pennsylvania, they often visited Furness's Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, built for the 1876 centennial, and his University of Pennsylvania Library. In 1973, the Philadelphia Museum of Art mounted the first retrospective of Furness's work, curated by James F. O'Gorman, George E. Thomas and Timon Myers. Thomas, Jeffrey A. Cohen and Michael J. Lewis authored Frank Furness, The Complete Works, 1991, revised 1996, with an introduction by Robert Venturi. Lewis wrote the first biography, Frank Furness, Architecture and the Violent Mind, 2001. The 2012 centenary of Furness's death was observed with exhibitions at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, the University of Pennsylvania, Drexel University, the Library Company of Philadelphia, the Athenaeum of Philadelphia, the Delaware Historical Society, the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, and elsewhere. On September 14, a Pennsylvania state historical marker was dedicated in front of Furness's boyhood home at 1426 Pine Street, Philadelphia, now Pierce College Alumni Hall. Opposite the marker is Furness's 1874-75 dormitory addition to the Pennsylvania Institute for the Deaf and Dumb, now the Furness Residence Hall of the University of the Arts. Selected architectural works: Philadelphia Buildings Northern Savings Fund Society Building, 1871-72, with George Hewitt. Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, Broad and Cherry Streets, 1871-76, with George Hewitt. Parish House, Church of St. Luke and the Epiphany, 330 South 13th Street, c. 1875, with George Hewitt. Thomas Hockley House, 21st and St. James Streets, 1875. Gatehouses, Philadelphia Zoological Gardens, 1875-76. Centennial National Bank, 33rd and Market Streets, 1876. Now Paul Peck Alumni Center, Drexel University. Kensington National Bank, Gerard and Frank Ford Aves, 1877, now a branch of Wells Fargo. St. Stephen's Episcopal Church Transept and Vestry Room, 19 South 10th Street, 1879. Knowlton, William H. Ron Mansion, Ron Street and Very Road, 1881. Gravers Lane Station, 200 East Gravers Lane, Chestnut Hill, 1882. Philadelphia and Reading Company Mount Airy Station, E. Gowan Ave and Devon Street, Mount Airy, 1882. Philadelphia and Reading Company Undine Barge Club, No. 13 Boathouse Row, 1882-83. First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, 2125 Chestnut Street, 1885. University of Pennsylvania Library, 34th Street, 1891. Now the Anne and Jerome Fisher Fine Arts Library. Mortuary Chapel, Mount Sinai Cemetery, Frankfort, 1891-92. Horace Jane House, 19th and Delancey Streets, 1895. Gerard Trust Bank, Broad and Chestnut Streets, 1907, now the Ritz-Carlton Philadelphia, constructed for the Gerard Trust Company. Henry's Home, sole surviving building of the demolished Thomas and H. Pratt McKean townhouses, 1923 Walnut Street, 1869. Undine Barge Club, Boathouse Row, Philadelphia, 1882. Demolished Philadelphia Buildings Germantown Unitarian Church, 1866-67 Road F. Shalom Synagogue, 1868-69. Thomas and H. Pratt McKean Townhouses, 1923-25 Walnut Street, 1869, demolished 1897 and 1920s. Lutheran Church of the Holy Communion, 1870-75. Guarantee Trust and Safe Deposit Company, 1875. Brazilian Section, Main Exhibition Building, Centennial Exposition, 1876. Church of the Redeemer for Seamen and Their Families, 1878. Provident Life and Trust Company, 1879. Library Company of Philadelphia Building, 1879-80. Reliance Insurance Company Building, 1881-82. National Bank of the Republic, later Philadelphia Clearing House, 1883-84. Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Station, 24th Street Station, 1886-88. The Cottage at the Institute of the Pennsylvania Hospital, c. 1888 Franklin Sugar Refinery, 125 South 12th Street, c. 1895. Alexander J. Cassett Townhouse, 202 West Rittenhouse Square, c. 1888. Broad Street Station, Pennsylvania Railroad, 1892-93. Arcade Building and Pedestrian Bridge to Broad Street Station, 1901-02. Buildings elsewhere. Railroad stations Wallingford Station, Wallingford, Pennsylvania, c. 1880. Mannheim Station, Mannheim, Pennsylvania, 1881, Philadelphia and Reading Company. East Strasburg Station, Petersburg, Pennsylvania, 1882, Philadelphia and Reading Company, moved to Strasburg Railroad. Sunbury Station, Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 1883, Philadelphia and Reading Company. Aberdeen Station, Aberdeen, Maryland, 1885, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. B&O Station, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1887, Demolished 1955, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Lansdowne Station, Lansdowne, Pennsylvania, 1901, Pennsylvania Railroad. Edgewood Station, Edgewood, Pennsylvania, 1903, Pennsylvania Railroad. Sherwood Station, Riderwood, Maryland, 1905, Northern Central Railway. Wilmington, Delaware. 3 buildings in Wilmington, Delaware, reputed to be the largest grouping of Furness-designed railroad buildings, form the Frank-Furness Railroad District. Water Street Station, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, ca. 1887. Pennsylvania Railroad Building, 1905. French Street Station, Wilmington Station, Pennsylvania Railroad, now Amtrak, 1908. Residences Grubb Cottage, E. Bird Grubb Estate, Burlington, New Jersey, 1872. Linden Shade, Horace Howard Furness House, Wallingford, Pennsylvania, 1873, demolished 1940. Fairholme, Fairman Rogers Mansion, Newport, Rhode Island, 1874-1875. Its carriage house is now Jean and David W. Wallace Hall, Sal Virginia University. George Fryer Cottage, Cape May, New Jersey, 1871-72, rebuilt after fire, 1878-79. Emlyn Fysick House, Cape May, New Jersey, 1879. Fairview, near Delaware City, Delaware, 1880. Alterations. Furness added a third story and rear wing to a 1922 farmhouse. Dillabran, Clement A. Griscom Mansion, Haverford, Pennsylvania, 1881, circa 1888, 1894. Lotta Crabtree Cottage, Mount Arlington, New Jersey, 1885-86. Idlewild, Frank Furness House, Idlewild Lane, Media, Pennsylvania, c. 1888. Ragged Edge, Col. Moorhead Kennedy House, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, 1900-1901. Schools. Williamson College of the Trades, formerly Williamson Free School of Mechanical Trades, Elwyn, Pennsylvania. Original campus buildings, completed in 1889-90. The Baldwin School, built as the second Bryn Mawr Hotel, Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, 1890. Recitation Hall, University of Delaware, Newark, Delaware, 1891. Haverford School, Haverford, Pennsylvania, 1902. Churches. All Hallows Church, Wyncote, Pennsylvania, 1897. Church of Our Father, Howells Cove, Mount Desert Island, Maine, 1890-91. St. Michael's Protestant Episcopal Church, Birdsboro, Pennsylvania, 1884-85. Other. Newcastle Public Library, Newcastle, Delaware, 1892, now Old Library Museum, Newcastle Historical Society. 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry, Russia's Lancers Monument, Gettysburg Battlefield, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 1888. Marion Cricket Club, Haverford, Pennsylvania. Allen Evans, Furness's partner, is credited with the design, 1896-97. Gallery. See also: List of American Civil War Medal of Honor recipients, AF. Notes. References. Sources: Lewis, Michael J., Frank Furness, Architecture and the Violent Mind, 2001. O'Gorman, James F., et al. The Architecture of Frank Furness, Philadelphia Museum of Art, 1973. Thayer, Preston, The Railroad Designs of Frank Furness, Architecture and Corporate Imagery in the Late 19th Century, University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Ph.D. dissertation, 1993. Thomas, George E., Jeffrey A. Cohen and Michael J. Lewis, Frank Furness, The Complete Works. Princeton Architectural Press, Revised Edition 1996. Venturi, Robert, Complexity and Contradiction in Architecture. The Museum of Modern Art, 1966. Eric J. Winberg, 2000. Captain Frank Furness, brilliant architect and Medal of Honor winner. The 6th Pennsylvania Cavalry, Russia's Lancers. Archived from the original on May 2, 2007. Retrieved May 12, 2007. Further reading: History Making Productions. Frank Furness, of Philadelphia original. Philadelphia, The Great Experiment. Retrieved the 1st of February 2013. Lewis, Michael J. The 7th of November 2012. Building Power. Wall Street Journal. Retrieved the 17th of January 2015. Lewis, Michael J. The 14th of November 2009. This Library Speaks Volumes. Wall Street Journal. Retrieved the 17th of January 2015. External links: Project List, Furness, Evans and Company at Philadelphia Architects and Buildings. Project List, Frank Furness at Philadelphia Architects and Buildings.